look for is early adopters and proof of concept, and then ultimately scale. We'd like to think the world is about books, ebooks, audiobooks, and Vooks. And whether it's Vooks or mixed media or enhanced ebooks, we're not sure. But we think in the scheme of the people on whatever floor here that worry about the P&L and second quarter earnings and the future of book publishing, I would say to them, who I meet with regularly, that it's a fourth product. And it's a fourth product that's new and interesting and a new way to engage and involve creators. And it's also a new product for consumers that want to interact with their media in a different way. And by the way, the proof of concept in that is pretty simple. It's the entire internet. It's video on the internet. It's everything else we do on the internet, which is a mixed media experience. It's often about chunks of content when we want, not when someone else tells us. We do with it what we want. We move it around. We save it. We share it. And that's already happening in the internet. The question is, can we take these stories, these great stories that are told in the book publishing industry, and we can put them into products and sell them like we do audiobooks and ebooks? We're convinced that's going to happen. So that's the other thing about proof of concept. Then scale, take our model, and we'll show you, I'm going to show you some ways that video is being used, and just to give you a taste of how we think about mixed media. We think that we're going to see user-generated content mixed with text. We think we're going to see high-end video production. We think we're going to see low-scale video production. The bottom line is you're going to see filmmakers and writers coming together. Much like authors come to publishers every day with new ideas and new forms and new genres and new styles, that is going to happen here. But in the film world, there's just a lot of ways to think about it, a lot of ways to chop it up. And the key is figuring out methods that not only create really good work, but also scale and have the economics that we can actually make this work. And that's where we've turned to this turn here filmmaker game. A great example is, I'll use Shakespeare again. We pushed it out to our filmmakers and we said, give us your ideas. And so instead of a handful of people in Hollywood and in San Francisco and New York deciding what we should read, just like how the music industry, we have all of these creators coming and telling us what that new form should be. And they came up with very clever ideas. We recently put out about 50 classics to this wide range of 1,500 filmmakers and came back about 100 proposals about how to do this and how to do that. Great example was Jack London. Had a book, which one was that? Caldwell. And we had a filmmaker who was up in the Northwest, and guess what he was into? He was not only a great filmmaker, but he was into dog sledding. And he had all this incredible B-roll. And so he had this really great narration with dog sledding with Jack London, whole new way to think about it. So again, if you get the creative energy of those filmmakers, you get all kinds of things. But scaling here is a challenge in that if you're creating a new form, and it costs money, which it should, because these are creators and they should be compensated, how is this done at a level that really creates an opportunity? To give you an example, this is what we're really working on, the efficiencies and the systems and the process and how to comp filmmakers and how to put them together with authors, and that's a lot of stuff. We call it our peanut butter, which I'll explain in a second. So some other things about how we look at this. And this says e-publishing. I'm not sure that's what we're doing exactly, but that's the word my guys put in there. So, one, strong titles. We're big on this influencer support. If you notice a very deliberate strategy of Vook, we got Gary Vaynerchuk with Crush It, which was very successful. He evangelized his 800,000 Twitter followers, all that network effect. Anne Rice is an example of that. Seth Godin next week, you're going to see this huge, interesting social marketing campaign with Seth's book that's coming out. And we're going to announce a whole bunch of what we call influencers, and we think this is not a form that people instantly get except when they see it, so it's important that people that influence these early adopters get out there. So a lot of our focus is on getting these early adopters, and I can't say enough about Anne and Seth and Gary, because they just got into it, and they're into it, and they're talking about it, and yesterday Anne's 57,000 Facebook users just got it. So I think when we think about these new forms, we've got to figure out who the influencers are and get them advocating what we're doing, because it's always hard to introduce a new product and get it going. I've talked about some of this other stuff. Now, what have we learned about mixed media? I'm from Southern Illinois, and there's an expression, getting through the peanut butter. Open your jar, getting it out, putting it in the toast, eating it, get stuck in your... and this is hard. The particular area there's peanut butter is in the rights area. This is, I think, a barrier, but there's a lot of cool ways to find great text. There is public domain. We did one book with a person who was a very good blogger, and we took all of her blog content, turned it into chapters, shot the video, and we had a book. Anne Rice is an example of a magazine piece. This is like Vietnam. There's a lot of landmines in navigating this stuff, but I don't think anything will get in our way. The bottom line is there's a lot of text out there, whether it's the backlist. There's a lot of work that's out there that's being created now. There's a lot of new work that can be created, and I don't think that should get in our way. But some of the things we've learned is, readers want this stuff. They're buying it. I've introduced a lot of internet products, and I've waited months to make one sale of anything or one deal or any kind of economics, and this happened very quick. People, they're wanting to experiment. They're wanting to try it, fit with their consciousness of mixed media because of the internet. Some of the things that is hard for publishers, is how do you create it? It's not something that book publishers are normally doing. There is no in-house creative teams. There's all these rights roadblocks, and then it's scalable technology. On the rights issue, this one is just to give you an idea how we structure some of our situations with publishers, as an example, or authors. We bring the video, they bring the text. We create together multimedia rights, and then we usually jointly own them. That's one way to do it. In some cases, we actually license and get the rights to the text. Now, what gets in our way in that formula? As I always say, I wish this wasn't such a big issue because I'd rather hire filmmakers and engineers than lawyers. But lawyers are right now firmly implanted in the center of this movement of innovation, which usually, by the way, is always the case. Whenever there's an industry that's going through this kind of implosion, lawyers tend to line up, and they're certainly lined up here. One of the big issues, if a house owns the ebook rights, that basically potentially is a stranglehold on the text, even if you're claiming multimedia rights. But again, it's just sorting out these various issues that you have to find. In a minute, I'm going to show you. These are some of the stuff that we think about that kind of go into multimedia. We created something called Mother Vook because it was clear to us right in the beginning that you need something scalable. And so this is a way to take all the assets. You have video assets, you have linking, you have the text, you have the conversion of the text to multiple formats. You have images, and you have all of these assets, and we're seeing more interactivity. Like with the iPad, there's all these cool tools, and these all represent tools, but also associated with them are assets. So the role of Mother Vook, which we hope to push out to all of our partners, but for now is our tool to try to manage these. And these are just some of the things you have to think about. I don't think it's that intimidating. I was at a conference recently where some of the people on the panel were all into the whole rights movement, and they were talking, not movement, necessary issues around not rights, but standards. And they were debating who was going to develop these standards. And just like XML, there are necessarily some standard issues. But the reality is, if you take video on the internet, there are a whole bunch of standards issues with television video, right? But somehow, some way, the force of technology and innovation, this huge imaginative group of people out there that were shooting video, suddenly were able to upload their work and put it on the internet and create $1.5 billion worth of value, at least in the eyes of Google, and gave everybody access to this. Now, did we violate some copyright in that scenario? Were some things stolen and ripped off, and were there some horrible things that happened? Yes. Only Google could afford to make that acquisition and fend off those lawsuits. And I would in no way defend that. But one thing when you look at that is the creative force of creators with technology, particularly with the internet, pretty much can't stop this. And so do we need standards in this world? Absolutely. But do we wait to innovate until the standards are in place? My fear would be that we're going to wait a lifetime. There are standard issues, but there's nothing that should get in our way.
Brad?
Yes?
Do you want to pause for a second?